Hi, my name is Mark Bernstein. I'm Director of Melbourne Design Studios. We're a young award-winning architecture firm in Melbourne, Australia, and we specialise in sustainable design and Passivhaus architecture because I believe it is really, really important that we do that. And I just want to talk to you a bit about a recent project of ours, which is actually my own house, which you can see in the background here.
The Hutt 01 project is a deeply personal project of yours, Mark. It seems to embody a design response to many ideas that you and Felicity hold dear. Can you tell us a little bit about the aspirations for the project?
So this project has always been more for us than just a family home. We set out to treat it as a case study, to try out, to measure, to experiment, to educate people with, and to convince our clients and the wider community that it is actually easy, really easy to take action in response to climate change. We are at a point where we have to say sorry to future generations. So this is about our house, but also about much more than that. We wanted to test and prove three things in particular. Firstly, that there are opportunities in our cities that lie vacant, that allow for smart soft densification close to existing infrastructure, the most sustainable way of building resilient cities into the future. Secondly, how close can we come to carbon neutral construction and carbon neutral living? And how quick and easy is it to achieve near net zero energy homes? How can we make construction better for the environment? And finally, within these settings, the question was, can we achieve the same or even better lifestyle that people are used to and that they are asking for when they come to us as architects? And can we deliver that even on a small site, creating a green oasis in the urban jungle? So this is a site here, a tiny cheese wedge next to some train tracks here, and the 10-storey apartment block next door, and then single to double-storey individual homes on the other side here. It's all accessed via this tiny L-shaped bluestone laneway, and so it's quite an odd block. It's almost a bit of a forgotten piece of land when we first came across it about 4 years ago. And so before we purchased the land, we did a feasibility study to see if it would actually work for us. At that stage, we often combine these slightly crude hand sketches with Vectorworks texture overlays to get a really, really quick visual idea together. And surprisingly, and maybe that's because we were our own clients in this case, the design hasn't actually changed much at all since those very first sketches. So that's a rare occasion. Usually there's quite a bit of evolvement happening. So then going into council application process, you can see the 10-storey apartments here, the access quite tight via this bluestone laneway here. And this is what the property looked like when we bought it. So it was basically just an old dilapidated tin shed. And with the train line next door, it was actually quite a challenge that we took on with this. We built a model, and you can see the proposal here. And it's a cardboard model because then you have something tactile for council officers to touch and to comment on, because their initial response was that they wouldn't allow any development on this piece of land. And so this helped us a lot to get them to come to the table, really. And of course, at the same time, we brought it into 3D in Vectorworks. And for us, it's always nice because you can start playing with it a lot quicker and a lot easier. We did model a bit of the surrounding areas, so you can see how it actually sits really, really nicely and mediates from the more commercial, city-like appearance of the apartments on one side down to the 2-storey and single-storey houses on the other side. And with the train line next door, I think that works actually really, really well. We utilised the model for the shadow studies as well, looking at the impact on neighbours, and we were actually really lucky we could build boundary to boundary because there are actually no neighbours on 3 sides of the block, so there's very, very little impact on anyone, which is great, of course. Now, when you look at these shadow studies, keep in mind, please, we're in Australia, so north is up the page and north is where the sun is. So if you're listening from anywhere in the northern hemisphere, you've got to swap that over, of course. Then we also used the model for some initial material studies, and you see here the house itself is this metal-clad volume playing with the vernacular forms, but also responding to the trains rushing past behind, and you can see that really, really well on the images in a minute. At the same time, though, it appears as floating above this brick fence that surrounds the site, so really it feels almost like a single-storey dwelling that's up in the air rather than the 2.5-storey building it actually is. So it's quite nice.
The project suffered a major setback halfway through construction. How did you and your family overcome that?
Yeah, look, it was pretty devastating, to be honest. But, you know, we just had to work through it. And the fire actually never made it to the inside of the building. So 2/3 of the outside, from outside of the CLT frame, was destroyed by the fire. And then everything inside was destroyed by the water. But the CLT and the windows and the bricks, they are actually parts that have survived the fire really, really well. So if anything, it's shown us that this kind of construction with prefabricated CLT is actually a fantastic way of building a house.
You have mentioned your desire to do everything you could with this project to make a positive environmental impact. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yeah, of course. We already talked about the urban densification aspect a little bit earlier, but really you can see this in every detail. So, for example, on the ground floor plan, the orientation is to the sun, maximizing solar heat gain, but then there's also great cross ventilation to flush out hot air in summer, with a cool breeze entering from the shaded and moist rainwater garden on the opposite side. And then on the middle floor, that has all the bedrooms, and it's all built on a very small footprint of only 78 square meters internally. But then we've utilized height and volume to allow the space to still appear very generous. So like the mezzanine sleeping beds that you can see here, that are actually above the main floor of the kids' bedrooms. And then there's also skylights at the top of the staircase. So when you open those, you can get the beautiful thermal chimney effect against overheating in our hot summers here, which is great, obviously. But having said that, our climate here is actually still a heating climate, so about 80% of energy goes into heating and only 20 or so % goes into cooling. So the house is actually designed to remove any heating requirement first and foremost. It is a Passivhaus, currently undergoing certification process, so there's a fairly detailed level of quality assurance in that. And we haven't actually used the heater once in our first winter here, and I mean that's one of the things I love about the house, right? There's also a very strong connection between the inside and the outside, which is based on an underlying biophilic design approach, really, with integrated planters, a sculpted roof garden on top of the garage, all the natural materials, cradle-to-cradle certified materials, the natural and breathable wood fibre insulation, triple glazed windows, low carbon concrete, prefabricated mass timber structure, the CLT that we mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of that, and then there's the recycled materials like the timber or recycled bricks that we've used, and a lot of these bricks we've actually collected from demolition sites ourselves, and we've cleaned them and brought them in and stacked them up, and it was quite involved. So if you're interested in our journey, you can actually have a look. It was filmed by Grand Designs Australia, so you can watch the whole journey there if you want to see it. So all up, I would say it's a showcase of sustainable design, but it's also a lot about health and comfort.
Prefab CLT structure before. What attracted you to prefabricating the building off-site? How did Vectorworks enable and facilitate this process?
Yeah, CLT is a great sustainable material choice, and it allows really quick installation on site. So the whole house was erected in just over a week. Us being owner builders allowed us to have a crew come in for that, but then we could be really hands-on with a lot of the other things as well, so that was great. It was good fun to utilize Vectorworks in a slightly different and creative way. So basically I stripped our BIM model back and then created the shop drawing model for these CLT panels from our general BIM model. And that allowed me to detail each of the joints and allow for some extra buffer. And some of that was actually pretty tricky. So in particular, the wall and roof junctions in this model, couldn't get them right with the automated tools. I basically had to remodel some of the bits as solids and extrudes to get it to the exact detail. Like you can see the shiplap joints here, or the ridge that has a higher Z value at this end compared to the other end due to the side geometry, or the eaves, which is the same height at the laneway and in the box gutter, but then different again on the far side. So it's actually quite complicated. And getting this 100% exact was super important because the manufacturer used our file, our 3D file, in a .sat format, exported straight out from here and read it directly into their software, and then CNC cut all the panels from there. So I was actually sweating beforehand, but really, really happy and amazed that we got it to work without any major hiccups, and I thought that was pretty cool. cool, and didn't expect you could actually do that with Vectorworks. So really great experience. Even though they're quite unforgiving and stiff panels, I think the worst spot we had was about 8mm out at the far end. And considering there are no right angles because the house just follows the wedge-shaped land, I thought that was a pretty amazing result. And this also enabled us to create these schedules directly off our Vectorworks model, which we used on site during the installation a lot because they have the installation sequencing number and the little 3D and the panel number. So it was always the quickest way to identify each panel quickly and ensure it goes to the right spot on site. I created a little movie also to discuss the installation order with the installers beforehand, and so that we can get that loaded into the container in Europe in the right order before it was shipped to Australia and then unloaded here. Having such a detailed model then also allowed us to detail the external window shades and assess where and in which format they would be most efficient, and where we might not need them, and then even detail a lot of the interior in 3D, like those cargo nets were pretty difficult to visualize where and how exactly they might be fixed and go up, and the bathrooms with the pretty intricate tiling, mosaic tiling here around the curve. I guess the one thing I would like to add next time is automizing the takeoffs for the Passivhaus calculations, the PHPP. And I've done that manually here because I just ran out of time for it on this job. But most of our projects are Passivhaus at this stage, so having a pre-configured schedule that reads the right values based on classes and giving formulas for the PHPP should be really straightforward, I think. And maybe that exists already and I just haven't found it yet. If that's the case, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for listening in. Feel free to contact me with any questions you may have with an email, or have a look at that Grand Designs episode if you want to find out more about our journey building the house. Thank you.